Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. TowerGate day number 1209, Sunday, August the 2nd, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, let's get to the Spygate news of the past 24 hours. Let's see, well, probably the biggest thing that broke in the last 24 hours was a tweet by Paul Sperry. We can assume that this will be followed by an article on Monday, as is usually the case. So Paul Sperry tweeting out just a few hours ago that John Bash is looking into the Obama administration's to and from and about queries related to the NSA's upstream collection of FISA 702 data going back to 2015 and earlier, which includes collections involving U.S. citizens and the use of that raw data by FBI contractors. Well, we knew we would eventually get here, did we not? And probably has a lot to do with the fact that Mike Rogers spent some time talking to John Durham right after he retired. And you have to know that this would have been one of the main topics that Rogers would have discussed with Durham, because Rogers knows the names of those contractors. And he would know if those names would be names that would be associated with the coup. We certainly can say with a high degree of certainty that when Mike Rogers went to talk to Trump during the transition period at Trump Tower, that he must have told him that he was under surveillance. Because the very next day, Trump moves everything out of Trump Tower and moves over to his office at his New Jersey golf course. And then we noticed that for a period of weeks after that, whenever he wanted to talk privately with somebody, he would take a walk on the golf course. He wouldn't even do it in his offices in New Jersey. He must have been informed that, hey, they can switch the signal. If you go to move some other location, they can simply switch the signal. Now, whether or not Rogers knew or told Trump what where the origin was for where that spying was coming from, I don't know. But I get the feeling he did, because of the comments Trump was making afterwards about foreign governments being involved. And of course we know that Brennan met with Hannigan, and then we know that Luke Harding wrote an article in The Guardian where he said, very matter-of-factly, oh yeah, the Obama administration asked the GCHQ to conduct these surveillance operations on Trump Tower because they couldn't do it in the U.S. And of course, nobody has been on top of the 702 query issue like Conservative Treehouse. They've covered it very much in depth. And we've been talking about this for a very long time. And of course, when the Judge Collier 99-page FISA court document came out, where, you know, it's not that really that heavily redacted, just the names and dates are redacted. But the activities that were taking place and the fact that 85% were unlawful, that's right there in the FISA court document. And remember, Collier uses the word unlawful. Rogers used the word unlawful. So now we have John Bash investigating those 702 queries, which Rogers and Collier stated were unlawful. So we already know that John Bash has a reputation of being a fairly hard-nosed U.S. attorney out of Texas, and we can assume that he's going to find this unlawful activity and tell us who the perps were. I think it's pretty obvious that one of them is going to be Confusion GPS, and I think that would include Nellie. I would not be surprised to see if one of those individuals turns out to be Benjamin Wittes, Comey's good friend. I wouldn't be surprised if we find out Daniel Richman, Comey's really good friend, who he actually gave a full access badge to so that he could actually come into the FBI building every day and access their systems. And there's a lot more. This is one thread that when you pull on this one, you unravel a lot of things that even go beyond, the coup. Because I believe that these activities have been going on probably since Obama, right after he came into office. And as Paul Sperry says here, John Bash is looking at this activity going back not just to 2015, but much earlier. I bet they'll find that this was used also in his run against Mitt Romney, because we've heard that rumor. In fact, they actually tried to play the Russia card to some extent on Romney. So this is good information, and this is being considered a separate investigation. It's part of the overall Durham investigation, but as Barr explained a while back, this conspiracy is so massive that you have to break it up into pieces. And that's why we now have 8 or 9 different U.S. attorneys looking at very specific things, because Durham was simply overwhelmed. And then we get hit with the Chinese virus and other things that have slowed things down. But now we know that as of June, what was it, June the 15th? I think it was June the 15th. Grand juries are now able to convene again. So, and we know, of course, Attorney General Barr in his testimony on the Hill, when he was pressed on whether or not he would withhold or delay bringing out any information, charges, reports, whatever, until after the election. And of course, Barr flatly said, no, I will not testify or swear under oath that I'm going to hold off until after the election to bring out whatever it is that Durham has got. No, I'm not going to do that. In other words, he's saying, oh yeah, we're going to bring this stuff out before the election. And again, I think that they have to do this before Labor Day. I don't think they can go much beyond Labor Day, because it's going to take some time once the information comes out for it to be properly aired out to the public. It's going to take a couple weeks of, once the report comes out, it's going to take a couple weeks for reporters and others to be able to read through it and then get that information out, allow people to, roll it around in their head for a while and see what they think about it or what have you. So it's not something that's going to drop at the end of October. I think it's something that they're going to try to drop. Barr said at the end of the summer, which would technically be September the 22nd or 21st. But I don't think they'll wait that long. I think that you can expect right after, just after Labor Day, I think is probably it. Now, obviously that won't be the end of the Durham investigation, because there's all these U.S. attorneys, like 8 or 9 of them, all working different pieces of it. But I think what the goal, I think, is to at least ways come out with some sort of a statement of where they are in the investigation. They will have pretty much know what's going on by that point, and it's just a matter of that time of going through all the various witnesses and possible targets to determine what to do with them. My guess is what they want right now before the election is to get plea deals, because plea deals are essentially guilty. That's people pleading guilty. You don't get a plea deal and say, well, I'll sign a plea deal, but I'm not going to admit to what I did. No. A plea deal means you admit your guilt. Number 1, you agree to cooperate with the investigation. Number 2, And number 3 is in exchange for 1 and 2, you can get leniency. So I think that what we can expect is plea agreements by those who have obviously committed offenses, felonious offenses, such as Kleinsmith altering a document, those who signed off on the FISA warrants who knew that the information was false. Those are all people that you can sit down with and say, look, we've got you red-handed. We've got the evidence. Now you can plead guilty because you're caught, and you can cooperate with the investigation and we'll go easy on you, give you a break, or you can choose to take it to trial, in which case we're going to throw every charge we got. You won't be looking at 1 or 2 charges, you'll be looking at a dozen, and we'll go for the maximum penalty on all. And we can spend a year or 2 going through the process whereby you'll be spending millions of dollars in legal fees if you've got the money to do that. So it's your call. So that's the position Durham wants some of these people in. I think getting the guilty pleas is essentially the admission of guilt of what they did. And the key people you want the guilty pleas from, obviously Kleinsmith, because he committed an obvious felony, the people who signed off on the FISA warrants who knew, the FBI agent and the senior analyst who allowed all this to go on even though they interviewed the so-called subsource and knew it was all bullshit. And then, of course, you have the key players who ran the whole thing, who had access to all the information, who continued with it anyway, and that would be Peter's been stroking us, Luce Lisa Page, McCabe, and you might be able to throw Comey into that mix as well. And so I think I think they're looking for about a half a dozen key plea deals. If you get plea deals from those 5 people, and they all cooperate, which is part of the plea deal, then you come out around Labor Day and say, okay, we got the guy who ran the operation, the 2 senior FBI people who were in charge of confirming the information, we have the people who signed off on the warrants, and then we have the individual who doctored these documents. And he didn't do that unless he was instructed to do it or had permission to do it. He didn't do it off on his own. So you get those 5 plea deals, that essentially locks down the correct narrative, which is the Obama administration illegally spied on the Trump campaign to, number 1, keep Trump from being elected. Once he was elected, then they had to continue what they were doing to try to cover up what they had been doing, but also to continue to force Trump out of office. That's where the coup comes into play. So I think that this is what we can expect around Labor Day. A handful of guilty pleas of key people, which will leave no doubt that the narrative that many of us have been putting out there for a long time is correct, and the opposing narrative was all lies, and they knew they were all lies. And that is what I think we can expect, as well as a summary of where they are on the investigation at that point, which is they're going to say, okay, we've got these 4 or 5 people, they pled guilty, so we've now blown up the narrative, we've proven that what we found in our investigation is true, this was essentially a coup attempt, and now from the plea deals we're going to gain more information from cooperating, these people who are now will be considered cooperating witnesses, and from that information, as well as other investigations still ongoing, we expect that there will be more shoes to drop in the days, weeks, and months to come. And that is where I think we'll be sitting on Election Day 2020. Douglas doesn't believe me. Douglas doesn't believe me, but that's okay, Douglas. You're all right, my man. By the way, Douglas, I won't say that I get everything right, but I've gotten most of it right. I highly recommend that you read the article written by Andrew McCarthy in the National Review. I think that article posted up yesterday, August 1st. That'll be day before yesterday as you're watching this video. Well, no, actually, I think it would be yesterday. I think it'll be Saturday. I can't remember. It's either Friday or Saturday in the National Review. Go over to thenationalreview.com. You will find this article by by Andrew McCarthy, and I highly recommend you read it. It's not as long as McCarthy's articles normally are. I mean, his articles are normally long, but this one here isn't that long. But it's a very, very good argument and a very good article. And he recently did like an hour-long interview with, I think it was Howie Carr, which he talks about this as well. So this article followed the conversation with Howie Carr. So I'm just going to go through some of the bullet points from this article by Andrew McCarthy. And again, he was a very, very good U.S. attorney. He's the one who prosecuted the Blind Sheikh in the first New York City bombings, prosecuted an awful lot of RICO cases and things and such. He has been around Washington, D.C. for a long time, and he's not a total Trump lover. I mean, he's been critical of Trump quite a bit. I don't consider him like a neocon or anything, but he calls Trump out when he doesn't like something Trump does. So he's not what I would call a Trump loyalist. But he certainly understands the difference between Trump and Obama. He knows what a coup looks like, and he certainly isn't a liberal Democrat or isn't supportive of any of that kind of ideology. So he's a fairly conservative individual, but not what I would consider a Trump lover. But his article is entitled, "Trump Himself Was the Target of Obama Administration's Russia Probe." Trump himself was the target of the Obama administration Russia probe. Now, we've known this for a very long time, that they created this narrative which would suggest that there were people around Trump who were being compromised by so-called Russians. They would never ever come out and say that they were directly investigating Trump until Trump fired Comey and McCabe launched an investigation, but that was an obstruction investigation into Trump for firing Comey. They never came out and admitted they were investigating Trump directly for being colluding with Russia or anything of that, nature. But Andrew McCarthy lays out the evidence that even though they would never come out and say the words, it was Trump himself who was the target of the Russia probe, and they could have just as easily called Operation Crossfire Hurricane Operation Get Trump. Just a few bullet points from the article, but you really want to go read it yourself. McCarthy points out how they used the intel briefing to spy on Trump. This is the most recent revelation, which is very damning. It's the notes of Joe Pientka, who conducted the briefing, and it stuck around the entire time while other questions were being asked by other people. And of course we know now, because of the nature of the notes and the file that they were placed in, that it was not in fact a real intel briefing for Trump, but rather an occasion to spy on Trump. McCarthy points out that they were able to keep a lid on the documents that would have revealed the Obama administration's activities as it relates to the targeting of President Trump. Yes, we remember that quite well. There was a point there not too long after Mueller was appointed. It would have been the summer, mid to late summer of 2017, when Trump had just about had enough, and he was being prompted by Nunes and Jordan and Gates and all these guys. Hey, you need to you're the president, release these documents, man. You've got the executive authority. Declassify these documents or release these documents. Give them to us, and we can come out and fight for you. And Trump, of course, announced in a tweet that he was going to do exactly that he was going to declassify documents and things, and these documents would have certainly revealed the coup, including how the ongoing Mueller witch hunt was part of the coup. And what happened? Well, we know what happened. Trump took a trip. Rod Rosenstein was on the plane trip with him. And while on that plane trip, Rosenstein advised Trump that it would not be a good move to declassify and force the release of these documents, because then it could be seen as obstruction of justice, obstructing the Mueller witch hunt, which Rodenstein referred to as an investigation. He told Trump, nope, can't release those documents. If you do, obstruction of the Mueller investigation. So that's how they tied Trump's hands. You know, Rodenstein, the white hat, who I told you was not a white hat from day one. McCarthy states that the biggest challenge was how to continue the probe, the witch hunt, even after Trump had taken the oath of office and was at least nominally in a position to shut it down. Yeah, that's exactly how they shut Trump down, as well as members of Congress who were trying to get to the bottom of it. They simply said, you know, we're not going to release the documents. That was Rodenstein's call. We're not going to release the documents because it will interfere with the Mueller investigation. And we now know that there was no Mueller investigation of Trump-Russia collusion. They knew from day one when they walked in the door that it was a fairy tale. Yet they kept it up anyway. And for that, Mueller, along with everyone on his legal team, about 20 of them, should all be in jail. But most importantly, Rodenstein threatened Trump. If you force to release those documents, I'm afraid we'll may have to charge you with obstructing the Mueller investigation. You will be impeached and removed from office. That's how they tied everybody's hands. The FBI intentionally concealed the existence of the Trump-Russia probe from the Gang of Eight. Oh yes. As we learned from this particular episode, which again was a late summer of 2017 revelation that we experienced at that time, where we found out that any type of sensitive investigations, the Gang of Eight are supposed to be advised of them within 90 days of any type of activity that would be considered a sensitive investigation. But they went 9 months. 9 months. Way beyond the 90-day period where they were supposed to advise the Gang of Eight what they were up to. That was Comey. Comey would have been in charge of that. But it would have included the Director of National Intelligence. That would have been Mr. Potato Head. Oh no, that would have been James Clapper. And of course the head of the CIA, which would have been Mr. Potato Head, John Brennan. So that briefing should have been given within 90 days by Clapper, Brennan, and Jimmy the Weasel to the Gang of Eight. But they did not. And if you remember, when Comey was questioned about that by Stefanik, Congresswoman who's awesome, Congresswoman Stefanik from New York, questioned Comey. Do you remember his answer? Well, it was because it was a sensitive investigation. Stefanik's like, wait a minute. You're supposed to brief the Gang of Eight within 90 days of a opening of an investigation. It's considered a sensitive investigation. But you're saying that the reason you didn't do it for 9, almost 10 months was because it was a sensitive investigation. That's exactly what Comey said in the hearings. And he got a free pass. Let's hope Durham doesn't give him a free pass. That son of a bitch needs to be in jail. He was the ringleader on the FBI side. They also sidelined Jeff Sessions and Michael Flynn so that Obama holdovers could then continue the plot and stop Sessions or Flynn from discovering and revealing the plot. Yep, they knew they had to get rid of certainly Flynn. I'm not so sure about Sessions. I never had much confidence in him anyway. But Let's just assume that had Sessions not been forced to recuse, he might have discovered what was going on, or they certainly would have had to have told him, because if he would have found out that there were things going on that were being hidden from him, he would have suspected something, smelled a rat, and probably would have launched an internal investigation, or maybe gone to Trump and said, you need to appoint an outside independent counsel to investigate these guys, because they're lying to me. There's something going on they're not telling me. Whether or not Sessions would have done that, that's pure speculation. We'll never know. But we can be absolutely certain that had Michael Flynn assumed his position as National Security Advisor, within a very short period of time, he certainly would have discovered it. And he would have blown it all up. That's why they had to go to such great lengths to frame Flynn, knowing good and well what they were doing was 100% illegal. They had no choice. They probably looked at it like, hey, we're blown up anyway. We're either 100% blown up if we don't go after Flynn, or we risk getting blown up if we do go after him, but we might succeed. After all, we've got Mueller in place. We'll put Mueller in place. We got a plan for how we're going to control the evidence so it doesn't get out. But we got to deal with this pesky Flynn guy. And now we know how that has worked out. And it continues. Which is more reason why Barr and Durham hopefully are getting the message that these people just didn't say after the election and say, whew, got away with one there, and shut it down and try to go back to normal. No! They've doubled down. They have no intention of backing off. And if they get away with this, just imagine what they'll do in 2020. We know that they stonewalled congressional investigators, the Nunes investigation, the Goodlatte Gowdy investigation, stonewalled them the entire time. Would never come off the documents. When they did, they were highly redacted. Would never allow the witness testimony, covered up all sorts of things, and was able to impede those investigations long enough for the Congress to switch hands, which would then put it in control of the Democrats, and there goes the investigations. On the House side. Now, on the Senate side, of course, there's no explanation for why Johnson, Grassley, and Graham allowed this to go on for so long. But I think the reason is probably they were terrified of being seen as questioning whether Russia interfered in the elections. They were terrified of the media campaign that would be brought against them, and probably were concerned that they would not get reelected if they rose a stink about it. They too were requesting some documents, but for the power that they hold, heads of those powerful Senate committees, they could have done a lot more. And I think that they had to know the corrupt nature of Burr and Warner on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and for some reason they do not, and still to this day, they would not, and still to this day, will not call these people out. I have no confidence whatsoever in the U.S. Senate. None. I mean, I like Ron Johnson. Grassley's not too bad of a guy. I don't trust Lindsey Graham as far as I can throw him. But Lindsey Graham is... Anytime Lindsey Graham does something that we have to say is good, releasing these documents and things, it's not because he wants to do it. He has no choice. He's in a very tough fight for his re-election. There's a lot of hardcore Trump supporters in South Carolina. We're sitting back watching him very closely. And he's doing absolutely the minimum that he has to do to walk that fine line to pacify Trump supporters in South Carolina, to make it look like he's really going after people. That's why he continues to go on Sean Hannity when he hates Hannity, and Hannity used to not like him so much. All of a sudden they're butt buddies because Hannity is a chump, and he's an easy play. Let's face it, Hannity's an easy play. He's a chump, and Graham knows that, and he's taking full advantage of Hannity. As soon as the election's over and Graham is reelected, you can expect he'll crawl back in his hole, and I don't expect much to come out of that. Graham will do the absolute minimum. The minimum. Not fooling me. The Obama administration and the FBI knew that it was they who were meddling in the 2016 election, using executive intelligence powers to monitor the president's political opposition. They knew it would be a scandalous abuse of power if it ever became public. They knew there was never any evidence of Trump-Russia collusion the entire time. Yet they perpetuated it for 3.5 years, and still, to this day, continue to perpetuate the lie. They have no choice. They know it's coming. The Obama administration structured an investigation on the fiction that there was a principled distinction between Trump himself and the Trump campaign, when in truth, the target was Trump himself. Absolutely. We figured that out about 3 years ago. 3.5 years ago. From the day I did the first TowerGate video, I knew who the target was. As I said before, Crossfire Hurricane could have been simply called the Trump investigation. The FBI tried to get Trump advisors to talk about Russia so their statements could be parsed so that they could be portrayed as incriminating. Yeah, that's what they were trying to do to Flynn and to Trump. They tried to do it to Trump in the so-called intel briefing with Pientka. The notes certainly prove that. And of course, that's exactly what they did to Flynn. We also know that the Pientka notes were edited, just like the Flynn notes were edited. We still don't have the original 302. We do not have the 302 notes from Pientka, the ones before they were edited. But we know that they were changed, edited to paint both Trump and Flynn in the worst light possible. We, of course, know the Comey briefing at Trump Tower was not to give Trump information, but to get information and to provoke Trump to making incriminating or false statements, or statements that would evince consciousness of guilt. They did the same thing to Flynn. They sandbagged him, made him think the FBI was coming over for a friendly little chit-chat, when the real intent was to trip him up. They also, as I just mentioned, edited that 302 to make it look like Flynn was lying. And of course, we have the Steele dossier, which was totally bogus. They knew that too. They used it to get 4 FISAs, and they knew it was garbage all the way back in the second week of February of 2017, and probably long before that. There was, of course, unmasking of Trump officials and advisors. We had the media leak strategy. They used allies in the media, foreign governments, private contractors, congressional Democrats, etc. This is what they're afraid of. Barr and Durham exposing all of this and more. This is why they're acting the way they are. This is why we're being put through this as a country. They put us through the Mueller witch hunt. They put us through the Ukraine hoax. They put us through the stuff prior to the election. And now they're putting us through the so-called coronavirus shutdown. They're still pushing the Russia narrative. They're going to cook up something else for the election. Again, to make it look like Trump rigged the election or something. These people will never stop. And everything that we just talked about is the reason why. That's how bad it is. That's how bad it is. Just like I said, from day one, when I first did the first TowerGate video, I said, if it turns out that what Trump is saying is true, this will be the biggest political scandal in U.S. history. And now we know that it was true. And it's even worse than we thought. See you guys next time.